They called it impossible, a four-cylinder engine built for the racetrack, sold to ordinary riders. The CB750's motor didn't just run, it conquered. But here's the shocking part. The truth Honda never wanted rivals to know. Stay till the end, miss it, and you'll never see motorcycles the same again. The impossible machine. No motorcycle should have been able to do this in 1969, but Honda built one anyway. In an era when most consumer bikes were simple twins, or at best modest triples, Honda unveiled a machine that looked like it had rolled out of a racetrack and into a showroom. The CB750 was powered by an air-cooled inline four-cylinder engine with a single overhead camshaft, a specification that had been reserved for exotic racing prototypes or impossibly expensive European machines. Suddenly, ordinary riders could walk into a dealership and purchase what had once been reserved for elite racers. It was not just a step forward in technology, it was a leap so far ahead that the rest of the industry scrambled to catch up. The numbers alone shocked the world. The CB750 produced nearly 70 horsepower, enough to push the bike past 125 miles per hour, speeds that placed it in the same class as the most expensive machines on Earth. Yet Honda's engineers had built it with reliability in mind, meaning this performance could be enjoyed day after day without the breakdowns that plagued British or American bikes. This mix of power, reliability, and accessibility was something riders had never seen before. It was as if Ferrari had suddenly sold a street-legal Formula One car for the price of a family sedan. And once the secret was out, there was no turning back. Breaking the rules of design, a disc brake on a street bike? To many, it looked like madness. Until 1969, drum brakes were the standard, and riders had learned to accept their limited stopping power as part of the motorcycle experience. Honda shattered that expectation with the CB750's hydraulic front disc brake, a system that delivered stopping performance far beyond anything the average rider had ever touched. What had been cutting-edge racing technology suddenly became available in suburban garages. Critics dismissed it as unnecessary, too complex for everyday use. Yet within a few years, every serious manufacturer would be forced to follow Honda's lead. The list of innovations did not stop there. The CB750 came with an electric starter at a time when most riders were still battling kick pedals. It was a feature that seemed indulgent until riders realized how effortless it made their daily routine. Honda also subjected the CB750 to brutal durability trials, running engines at 70% power for 200 hours and then at full throttle for 20 hours. These tests proved that the machine was not just fast, but also nearly unbreakable. While rivals depended on tradition, Honda doubled down on engineering discipline, designing a machine that could be ridden across continents without fear of catastrophic failure. The CB750 was not just breaking design rules, it was rewriting the social contract between motorcycle and rider. The promise was clear: performance without punishment, speed without sacrifice. Honda had promised performance without punishment, speed without sacrifice, and that promise rattled an entire industry as rivals realized their comfortable empires were under siege. If you're enjoying uncovering the hidden truth behind Honda's CB750, do me a quick favor, hit that like button so more people can see this story. And while you're at it, drop a comment below. What shocks you most so far, the engineering leaps or the risks Honda dared to take? A gun to Britain's heart. This was not just a motorcycle. It was an execution notice for Britain's industry. For decades, Triumph, Norton, and BSA had ruled the roads of Europe and America with machines that blended style and character. Their twins and triples were fast enough for most and carried the aura of tradition. But the CB750 arrived like an invading army. It was faster, smoother, more reliable, and astonishingly affordable. For the price of a Triumph Bonneville, a buyer could now own a motorcycle that eclipsed it in nearly every measurable category. It was not just competition, it was annihilation. The British manufacturers never saw it coming. They had grown accustomed to incremental updates and assumed loyalty would keep customers tied to heritage brands. But riders are not sentimental when faced with a machine that starts every morning, runs without leaking oil, and outpaces rivals on the open road. The CB750's sales exploded, and by the mid-70s, Honda had sold hundreds of thousands of units worldwide. Each bike on the road was a rolling billboard that declared the end of Britain's dominance. Industry insiders whispered that the CB750 had done in 1 decade what no economic policy could achieve. It dismantled the pride of British motorcycling. The shock went beyond specifications. Riders described the CB750 as something out of another dimension, a machine that purred at idle yet screamed like a banshee when unleashed. It was elegance fused with aggression, a motorcycle that felt both futuristic and accessible, making competitors seem instantly outdated. Each CB750 on the road was a rolling declaration of Japan's rise, and the humiliated British builders could only watch as the tide turned against them. Just like the CB750 rewrote the rules, the right setup rewrites your ride. We've prepared a list of reliable accessories and rider gear. Check the description. The cracks in perfection. For all its brilliance, riders soon found the CB750 was not invincible. The frame, though adequate for ordinary commuting, flexed noticeably under aggressive riding. At high speeds, the handling could feel vague, a reminder that Honda had stretched into uncharted territory. The rear shocks were considered soft, unsuited for the kind of spirited performance that the engine encouraged. Lighting systems, while functional, lacked the sharpness that riders expected from a machine otherwise brimming with advanced technology. These shortcomings gave critics ammunition, suggesting that Honda's so-called masterpiece had arrived unfinished. But something remarkable happened. Instead of rejecting the CB750, riders embraced its flaws. They stiffened frames, upgraded suspensions, and experimented with custom modifications. Independent shops thrived, building parts and upgrades that turned weaknesses into opportunities. What might have been seen as deal-breaking defects instead helped ignite a culture of customization that gave the CB750 an even longer life in garages and workshops. The imperfections did not kill the legend, they fed it, creating a motorcycle that was both universal and personal. It was a machine riders could make their own, blending factory brilliance with individual creativity. What might have been flaws became fuel for a new culture of modification, ensuring the CB750's influence would stretch far beyond its factory form. Built in secret, launched to shock. In a lockdown workshop, Honda's engineers built what looked like science fiction. Few outside the company even knew such a project was underway. And inside Japan, the secrecy bordered on obsession. The CB750 did not emerge from a leisurely development cycle, but from a compressed, high-pressure mission led by Yoshiro Harada and his team. Their orders were clear: create a motorcycle that would not simply compete in the American and European markets, but dominate them outright. The strategy was radical for its time. Instead of chasing tradition, Honda committed to shocking the public with technology that seemed stolen from the racetrack and adapted for the street. Every nut, bolt, and weld was treated as if national pride depended on it. In many ways, it did. When the CB750 was unveiled at the Tokyo Motor Show in late 1968, jaws dropped. The motorcycle world had grown used to gradual improvements, not sudden revolutions. Yet here was a production bike boasting a transverse inline-4 engine with overhead camshaft and a front disc brake. To most manufacturers, it seemed as though Honda had skipped an entire decade of evolution in one unveiling. What few knew at the time was just how close Honda came to abandoning the project, fearing that the market might reject such an advanced and expensive machine. Instead, the gamble worked beyond imagination. The gamble paid off, but the real shock would arrive when ordinary riders saw a price tag that put racing power within reach of everyday paychecks. Freedom at a price the middle class could afford. For the first time, world-class performance cost less than a used car. Honda priced the CB750 at $1,666 in the United States, a sum that placed it within reach of middle-class riders who had previously been priced out of true performance machines. This was the era of muscle cars roaring through suburbia, Yet few motorcycles offered the same intoxicating blend of speed and affordability. Suddenly, a working family could justify purchasing a machine that delivered the thrill of racing without bankrupting the household. The CB750 was no longer just a motorcycle. It was an invitation to experience freedom at highway speed. The effect was immediate. Young adults and blue-collar workers who had never considered a high-performance bike now found themselves signing purchase agreements. For the cost of a modest vacation, they could own a motorcycle that rivaled the best from Europe. It was democratization in steel and chrome, a cultural shift that blurred the line between elite and ordinary. This was not only about horsepower, it was about identity, about the ability to participate in a global culture of speed without needing aristocratic wealth. Honda had cracked open the doors of exclusivity and invited the middle class inside. With ownership suddenly possible for the middle class, the CB750 did more than fill garages. It ignited a wave of creativity that Honda never anticipated, the custom culture explosion. What riders did with their CB750s shocked even Honda. In garages across the world, the motorcycle became a blank canvas for creativity, rebellion, and personal identity. Some riders stripped their CB750s down into minimalist cafe racers, racing between city blocks as though they were on the Isle of Man. Others stretched frames, added extended forks, and created flamboyant choppers that rivaled anything rolling out of California custom shops. The CB750's combination of reliable power and relatively affordable parts made it irresistible to tinkerers. Unlike temperamental European engines, Honda's four-cylinder could survive experimentation without constant breakdowns. The aftermarket industry exploded in response. Independent companies began producing exhaust systems, carburetor kits, suspension upgrades, and visual accessories. Riders discovered that the CB750 was not just a motorcycle, but a platform. Each modification was a declaration of independence, a way of saying that ownership meant more than conformity. Honda may have designed the CB750 to be a universal machine, but in the hands of riders, it became uniquely personal. Still, beneath the choppers, racers, and customs, a deeper pattern was forming. From stripped cafe racers to flamboyant choppers, each creation whispered a truth. The CB750 had stopped being just a product and had become a movement. The UJM template. Honda did not just launch a motorcycle, they created a formula the world could not escape. The CB750 became the archetype for what came to be called the Universal Japanese Motorcycle, or UJM. The concept was simple but devastatingly effective. A reliable inline-4 engine, straightforward frame, standard riding position, and affordable price. It was not exotic or eccentric. It was practical perfection, a design that worked in Tokyo, London, or Los Angeles. Within a few years, rivals like Kawasaki with the Z1, Suzuki with the GS750, and Yamaha with the XS11 were following the template almost to the letter. This was more than imitation. It was the birth of a new industrial era. The CB750 had reset consumer expectations to such a degree that any manufacturer unwilling to adopt the formula risked irrelevance. British twins and American V-twins suddenly looked like relics from another age, charming but outdated. The UJM concept dominated the 1970s, forcing the global motorcycle industry to orbit around Japanese engineering. Honda had not just created a motorcycle, they had invented a category that became the default for an entire generation. By defining the universal Japanese motorcycle, Honda set the blueprint, and the fallout would be measured not in sales charts, but in the industries it toppled. British industry, on its knees. Factories that once ruled the roads now sat silent. By the early 1970s, Britain's motorcycle industry, once the pride of Triumph, Norton, and BSA, was collapsing under the weight of Honda's CB750 and the wave of Japanese imports it inspired. For decades, British bikes had symbolized craftsmanship and heritage, exported across the Atlantic to eager American riders. But when the CB750 arrived, The weaknesses of the British machines were exposed in brutal fashion. Oil leaks, electrical issues, and outdated engineering suddenly looked unforgivable when compared to the smooth reliability of Honda's four-cylinder marvel. The economic toll was catastrophic. Plants in Birmingham and Coventry that had provided steady work for generations began shutting down. Thousands of skilled workers found themselves unemployed, and whole towns that had once thrived on motorcycle production fell into decline. The CB750 was more than a machine. It was a wrecking ball that swung straight into the heart of Britain's industrial pride. Riders abandoned tradition not out of disloyalty, but because the Japanese alternative was simply better, faster, and cheaper. It was a devastating cultural blow as much as an economic one. For a nation that had defined itself as the birthplace of motorcycling glory, watching factories shutter was like losing a piece of its soul. Britain's collapse was a warning, yet across the ocean another giant faced a reckoning that would pull politics directly into the fight for survival. Harley's American Nightmare. In Milwaukee, panic spread faster than exhaust fumes. Harley-Davidson, the symbol of American motorcycling, suddenly found itself facing an existential threat. The CB750 and its Japanese siblings were pouring into the United States market, offering speed, reliability, and affordability that Harley could not match. For decades, Harley had leaned on brand loyalty, chrome-heavy styling, and the deep thrum of its V-twins to hold dominance. But younger riders were less interested in nostalgia and more interested in horsepower that actually delivered. The CB750 offered both accessibility and cutting-edge performance, and Harley's heavy cruisers began to look like dinosaurs overnight. The panic grew so fierce that Harley's leadership turned not just to engineers, but to politicians. Congressional hearings echoed with talk of tariffs and Buy American campaigns. In 1983, the Reagan administration imposed a temporary tariff on imported Japanese motorcycles above 700 cubic centimeters, a desperate attempt to give Harley breathing room. Yet the damage was already done. By the late 70s, Honda and its rivals controlled huge portions of the American market, and Harley was fighting for survival. Legislators might have tried to shield Harley-Davidson, but Honda was already proving its dominance in the one arena where protectionism had no influence: the racetrack, racing the impossible. On the track, the CB750 became something nobody saw coming. Honda had designed it primarily as a road-going machine, yet it quickly proved itself on racing circuits where heritage brands assumed dominance. The most spectacular moment came in 1970 at Daytona, when modified versions of the CB750, known as CR750s, lined up against established racing machinery. These bikes were little more than street machines upgraded for competition, but in the hands of riders like Dick Mann, they stunned the world. Mann piloted his CR750 to victory at the Daytona 200, instantly proving that Honda's technological gamble was not only a commercial success, but also a sporting one. The racing community could hardly believe it. A mass-produced motorcycle available to ordinary riders had just beaten specialized machines crafted for competition. The CR750s screamed down the straights with a ferocity that rivaled the best. That victory carried symbolic weight far beyond the trophy. It said that Japanese engineering had matured to the point of conquering arenas once reserved for Europeans and Americans. It redefined the line between street and track, showing that ordinary customers could own the bones of a race winner. Daytona had been the opening act. The true revolution was unfolding inside Japan's factories, where Honda rewrote the rules of global production itself. The birth of global manufacturing supremacy. This was not just a bike, it was a factory revolution. The CB750 marked a turning point not only for riders, but for the way motorcycles were manufactured. Honda applied its philosophy of precision, consistency, and efficiency on a scale that left Western competitors scrambling. Where British and American factories often relied on manual fitting and traditional craftsmanship, Honda introduced a new standard of automated mass production combined with obsessive quality control. Every CB750 rolling out of the factory was nearly identical, every tolerance checked, every flaw eliminated before it reached the customer. This manufacturing approach created a shockwave through global industry. It was not only that Honda built a better motorcycle, it was that they had devised a way to build hundreds of thousands of them without sacrificing quality. Competitors tried to match the scale, but lacked the discipline and systems to maintain consistency. What emerged was a new global standard, the Japanese production model, which would go on to influence not just motorcycles but automobiles, electronics, and countless other sectors. The CB750 was proof that manufacturing itself could be a weapon, one that toppled rivals as effectively as any engineering breakthrough. The CB750 was no longer only a motorcycle. It was a signal flare announcing that industrial power had shifted, with consequences reaching far beyond motorcycling. The motorcycle as a political weapon. The CB750 was not just sold, it was feared in Washington and London. To Western leaders, the motorcycle became a symbol of Japan's unstoppable industrial rise. It was not merely that the bike outsold and outperformed its rivals. It was that every CB750 shipped overseas represented a trade imbalance, a factory closure, or a lost job in Britain or America. Politicians began framing Japanese motorcycles as part of a larger economic invasion. What once seemed like a niche market suddenly carried geopolitical weight, with the CB750 positioned as proof that Japanese firms could outmaneuver Western companies on their home turf. This fear was not abstract. In Britain, lawmakers debated subsidies to save the remnants of the domestic motorcycle industry, while in the United States, the success of Honda fed into broader tensions about tariffs and trade policy. The CB750's dominance was invoked in hearings where legislators asked why American factories could not produce machines of equal quality at competitive prices. The motorcycle became a shorthand for globalization itself, efficient, affordable, and threatening to established powers. To ride a CB750 was to ride a machine at the center of an economic storm. To ride a CB750 was to sit astride the future, and nowhere was that future more visible than in the factories that built it. Workers, wages, and the assembly line. Every CB750 carried not just horsepower, but a new kind of labor story. Japanese factories in the late 1960s and early 70s were run with an intensity and precision that shocked Western observers. Workers were not simply employees. They were members of tightly knit teams drilled in efficiency and discipline. Quality circles, just-in-time delivery systems, and an almost spiritual dedication to perfection defined Honda's plants. The CB750 was the product of this environment, a motorcycle that embodied not just engineering, but a philosophy of labor itself. By contrast, Western factories were struggling. In Britain, strikes and outdated production techniques slowed output, while in America, Harley-Davidson fought rising costs and inconsistent quality. Workers there identified more with union battles than with the pursuit of flawless products. The contrast was brutal. Each CB750 that rolled out of a Japanese factory highlighted the gap between two labor cultures, one that prioritized teamwork and innovation, and another bogged down by mistrust and inefficiency. The motorcycle was more than a machine. It was proof that a new industrial order was emerging, one that valued process as highly as product. Labor practices told one story, but the people riding the CB750 were writing another, one that would transform how society perceived motorcycles themselves. A machine that changed consumers forever. This was not just a ride, it rewired how people saw motorcycles. Before the CB750, bikes were often cast as rebellious symbols, machines for outlaws, dreamers, or racers living on the edge. Honda's four-cylinder changed that. Suddenly, families considered motorcycles as practical, dependable tools of daily life. Commuters began using them not only for thrill rides, but also for transportation, trusting that the CB750 would start every morning and carry them reliably to work. The rebellious aura did not disappear, but it was joined by a new respectability. The motorcycle had entered the mainstream. Culturally, the CB750 also became an icon. It starred in advertisements that promised adventure and independence without chaos. It appeared in films, on posters, and in countless garages as the centerpiece of a new identity. Riders no longer had to choose between a dangerous image and practicality. They could have both. The CB750 blurred the line between outlaw cool and suburban reliability, creating a consumer identity that still resonates today. For the first time, motorcycles were seen not just as passion purchases, but as rational, everyday choices. As consumers embraced this new identity, the CB750 had already secured its place in history as a machine whose legacy would prove inescapable. You've stayed with me through this journey of power, culture, and revolution. So before we dive into it, make sure you subscribe right now and turn on notifications. That way, you'll never miss stories like this again. The legacy nobody escaped. 50 years later, every motorcycle on the road owes something to the CB750. Historians now call it the Model T of motorcycles, a machine that did for 2 wheels what Henry Ford's car did for 4. It democratized technology once reserved for elites and established a template that still defines the industry. Inline-4 engines, front disc brakes, and accessible performance remain the backbone of modern motorcycles, all rooted in that original breakthrough from 1969. The DNA of the CB750 runs through sport bikes, touring machines, and even the cruisers that once dismissed Honda as an outsider. But its influence stretches beyond engineering. The CB750 is a story of globalization, of how one machine helped shift economic power eastward and forced entire industries to reinvent themselves. It is a reminder that technology can be both a gift and a threat, opening doors for consumers while closing factories for competitors. To this day, when companies design affordable motorcycles meant to capture global markets, they are echoing Honda's bold move from half a century ago. The CB750 was not just a motorcycle, it was a turning point in industrial history, and so the shockwaves of its arrival never ended. The machine that once seemed impossible became the standard everyone was forced to follow, leaving behind a legacy that still defines the very idea of what a motorcycle can and should be. The CB750 wasn't just a motorcycle, it was a revolution that rewrote industries, identities, and even your daily choices. If this deep dive opened your eyes, hit like so more riders and history lovers discover the truth. Drop a comment below. What surprised you most about Honda's gamble? And don't leave without subscribing, because the next story might change the way you see machines, power, and even yourself. Turn on notifications now because you don't want to miss the hidden histories shaping the world around you. The next revelation is already on its way. Make sure you're here for it.